When you work at a theme park, you're going to run into wild animals. And sometimes the encounters are funny, kind of worrisome, and every now and then they can be downright terrifying. Hey, if you enjoy some of these stories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much. I've had the wonderful privilege of working for 3 different companies, for Busch Gardens, for Walt Disney World, and for Silver Dollar City up in Missouri. And in every single place I've worked, I've had to deal with wild animals. And some of them more wild than others. At Busch Gardens, of course, I was a Rhino rally driver. Part of my job was driving guests around wild animals. Yes, they were in enclosures. Yes, there had been some training that took place. But the animals still had a lot of their wild habits. For example, the rhinos. We knew because of the size of the rhino that if they got riled up, that we should make sure we keep our distance. But at the same time, they were also partially trained, which is why they had one spot that they would use to go to the bathroom. We called it Mount Poop. They also had a rather interesting thing about them. They actually had first names, and they would respond to their first name. In fact, one of the rhinos out there was called Mike. Why on earth they called him Mike, I don't know. And if we had a co-pilot that was named Mike, we had to be very careful not to use the name, because the rhino could hear it and think we were calling him. And you're going, oh yeah, that's not gonna happen, no way. Except for one time with me when it did. And I was talking to my co-pilot and looked at him and went, so Mike, what are you going to do? And the rhino heard and started looking up like a big old kitty cat or a dog. My name, where's my treat? And he comes trotting over to my Land Rover, looking for a treat because he'd heard his name. And I didn't have a treat. And after a few minutes of realizing that this rhino's right next to my Land Rover, actually rubbing the side just a little bit trying to get something, and he's not getting anything, Mike the rhino realizes he's not real happy and turns around and headbutts my Land Rover. Time to get out of here. Not exactly what you expect from a rhino. We would have other unexpected things too, like the scimitar-horned oryx. Busch Gardens was in the process of revitalizing and reviving the population of them so they could be replanted in the wild. Well, part of that was their breeding program, and one of the things that the scimitar-horned oryx does is kind of unusual in that regard, in that if one of the females is relieving themselves, the males like to go over and drink it at the same time to find out if they're ready to go in heat to reproduce. So we would be driving around sometimes, and here's male oryx drinking female oryx's pee as she's going, and you would have people going, ew, what's that? Well, she's trying to find out if she's ready to get pregnant or not. It made for some kind of interesting and awkward moments. That happened on a regular basis, though, so it was kind of like, well, we gotta come up with something. Oryxes are awkward in that regard. Walt Disney World had its own animal encounters. In my case, particularly at Magic Kingdom. I didn't work at Animal Kingdom that often, so I didn't have to worry about it there. Magic Kingdom was probably best known for its rabbits on the lawns, which I don't know if they're there anymore since they redid the hub. I hope they didn't chase away the bunnies. And for the ducks in particular. There's ducks all over Magic Kingdom. They own the moats, or at least they think they do, and everything around it. And they have ducklings. Well, people would love looking at the ducks from a distance, but especially when duckling season would come, people liked getting really close. Too close. You would have the snotty teenagers who think it was cool to chase a duck and ducklings, in which case we would have to step in and try to protect them, and had to do that a couple times, more than a couple times. Why do you want to chase a duckling? It's not funny. That was one of the things that just annoyed the crud out of me. And shoo them away from the ducklings. We did have to have security come and have a nice little talk with one family. I didn't call them, actually security happened to see them as they were walking by. But it was just like, leave the ducklings alone. It made for some interesting times because they liked to walk across the parade route and around the hub and where people were eating. And so you would constantly see these ducklings going back and forth. Probably one of the oddest encounters I had, though, was one time when I was shooting pictures at Partners, the statue in front of the castle. There's a really nice flower garden around it. We came out one morning and got ready to set up our pictures, and here's Mama Duck who's made a nest in the middle of the flowers. Yeah, okay, fine. Normally, if they would do that, they've been kind of nesting there for the night, then they would move on. Well, as the day progresses, Mama's not moving. Mama's not going anywhere. Not only that, but Florida, of course, it starts getting hot. It's in the middle of the sun. There's no shade, there's no cover, and you could tell Mama starts to dehydrate because she starts panting almost like a dog. At that point, we started getting a little worried. We actually ended up sending somebody to call in gardening who came out and actually came and very gently had a very nice pre-made nest. I don't know how they did it, but we closed off the area, kind of made a blockade. Hey, folks, stay away from the duck. Leave the duck alone. Let the duck do her thing. And eventually they came out and they managed to have a container and gently get Mama Duck and her nest into the container and then carry her off someplace a little bit safer so the guests would leave her alone. Yeah, we had duck issues. The other big issue at Magic Kingdom, and really all the Disney parks, is the birds. Florida has a ton of birds, and these birds learned free food. So if you're at one of the outdoor eateries, say Casey's on the corner there, or the Flame Tree Barbecue over at Animal Kingdom, or any place that had tables outside, these birds learned free meal, and they would be all over the place. The outdoor eatery in Mexico was a great or terrible place for them. For the most part, they'd leave you alone. They were just looking for you to drop food, and of course, people would, because they're like, oh, cool, let's feed the birds. Don't feed the birds, because it encourages them to stay there and to beg and to become a problem. That and a lot of the food that people would feed them would get them sick. Birds became a real issue at times, especially when some of them really started marking off territory, or they would start getting aggressive with guests, and then Disney would have to find ways to chase them off and fence off things. But probably the place I had the most interesting encounters, and a couple of the scariest, was actually at Silver Dollar City. On the train at Silver Dollar City, we go out into the woods, and in the woods, in the Ozarks, there are a lot of wild animals. Of course, the park has squirrels all over the place. We also had chipmunks. We actually had a really cute little chipmunk family that lived right under the train station, and they would pop out of a hole by the post, look at people, maybe get some popcorn, and go right back down the same hole. We'd see that one all the time. But we'd have a lot of other animals out there too. We had a family of raccoons that actually lived up in top of the flooded mine. There would be times when we'd come out early morning, start cleaning up and getting ready, and here comes this mama raccoon leading her babies back up into the flooded mine. Oh, hi, Mama. There you go. Yeah, just keep right on going. The scariest encounter I had at the train depot, though, wasn't with the raccoons or the squirrels or the chipmunks. I had our big mechanical blower out there one morning, and I'm blowing off all the trash in the depot and on the platform and everything, getting it all cleaned up, ready. And as I look out, there was a patch of woods that was between the train station and the stage down on the lower level. It's got a waterfall in it now, and it's not wild like it used to be. But at the time, it was still kind of a wild section in the middle of the park. And as I'm blowing, going towards our break room, I look over, and there's this stray cat out there. Why on earth do we have a stray cat? We've got lots of animals, but who dumped their cat, and how on earth did it get here? And so as I'm blowing, I'm thinking, well, okay, am I going to call this cat to me? What am I going to do? And as I start getting a little bit closer to it and blowing along, I start getting a better look at this cat. And a cat isn't this big. Cat is about this big. And gray with spots and about like so. And I'm realizing this ain't no stray kitty. This is a bobcat. And it's looking right at me while I'm blowing. And I'm kind of going, this is not a good thing. Kitty I mess with. Bob Kitty I ain't messing with. And as I'm starting to figure out what to do, I actually decided, well, all right, let's go into the break room. My boss is in there. Shut off my blower, run into the break room. And at the same time, I see this bobcat start running towards me. Get into the break room, shut the door. I'm like, hey, Josh, guess what? Bobcat. What? And so we're trying to figure out, okay, do we open the door? Because I know the bobcat was coming up. What do we do? After a few minutes, we finally open up the door and peek out, and there's no bobcat. And we start kind of gradually looking around and realize right where this bobcat was running up to the train station, there's actually an opening in the boards that go down to the ground under the station. It ran under the depot. which means it's probably hiding under there. We're just like, oh, great. Lovely thing to have living under our depot. Yeah, that was a great morning encounter. We would see all sorts of other stuff going out into the woods, though. We had one time, we had this huge barn owl. It was he probably stood like that tall. I mean, 3 feet. He was huge. Spread its wings when he finally flew off after a few times around. Just a humongous barn owl. So amazing to see. We would see eagles and hawks, and we constantly had deer out there. It was not unusual for us in the spring and early summer to have at least 2 or 3 does and their fawns. We had a couple years that we had twins out there, which was really neat because you'd be able to watch for them and point them out to the guests on the train. We used to have a white squirrel that lived out there too. We loved Whitey. We'd actually go out and feed Whitey. Take some old leftover popcorn, set it out there for him and the deer to try to get him to come near the track so people could see him. Groundhogs, big groundhogs. One time as they were coming around with the engine in the morning, getting it ready, and there was a groundhog on the tracks that didn't move fast enough. Train was delayed a little bit that day. Yeah, normally we would see them on the side of the tracks, and they knew enough to stay away from the train, but that one apparently didn't. But they were big. You think groundhogs, small things, but no, if you think about Groundhog Day, when they're holding up that big old huge groundhog, that's what we had. They were mammoth things. We had one time, for whatever reason, down at the train roundhouse, we had a giant snapping turtle. Big old thing. Who's going to move it? I ain't moving it. You going to move it? I ain't moving it. I think he finally wandered off, but big old snapping turtle. I had to get pictures of that one. One of the funniest moments, though, was actually my last year there. Before the park opened for the year, we're doing our preseason training. Of course, we got these squirrels around. These squirrels get very used to people. We get used to them, and the squirrels know how to beg for food and get it. Well, my lead decides that, hey, there's a squirrel that we recognize. I'm going to go feed the squirrel. And we're kind of going, you don't want to do that. Leave the squirrel alone. I got to go feed the squirrel. Well, he goes up, and he actually manages to get the squirrel onto his hand, feeding it. And then gets bit. Why did you do that? And we're giving him a bad time. Like, really? You knew it was a wild squirrel. You knew. Has to feed the squirrel and gets bit. That wasn't the funny part. Our training actually got called short that day because, he got bit on the job by a wild animal. Goes up to first aid. Oh, it's just a scratch. It's no big deal. It's a wild rodent. And they had to send him off to go get rabies shots because he had to feed the squirrel. Don't feed the squirrel. Yeah, he got dubbed Squirrel for a good bit of the year. Hey, Josh, squirrel! Ah! Oh yeah, we harassed him quite a while for that. The scariest moment, though, also came at Silver Dollar City. We were in the middle of Moonlight Madness. Normally, Silver Dollar City closes at 7 o'clock during the summer. It's an early closed park. But there's 2 weeks at the end of July and the first part of August where it stays open until 10, and you do late night train rides. And we'd been out there one time. I was riding on the back of the train at the end of the day. I was the conductor, and we're heading around, bringing the train around to put it away, and also to pick up our train robbers who'd been out there. The train robbers during Moonlight Madness, because we had lights out in the woods for the wreck and a couple other things, they would have to turn off all the lights, make sure everything at the robbery scene was shut down, and then walk down the tracks to the wreck, turn off the lights at the wreck, and then we would stop and pick them up there. We finally pull up and stop, and they're jumping on the train before it's even stopped and yelling, "Go, go, go, go!" So I flip the switch and tell the engineer, "We're clear, go!" And they're just looking around. I'm like, what is wrong with you guys? Well, we went out there, and as we're staying there with our flashlights, making sure we got everything, we hear something, and we look over, and we see a couple eyes, and then as our flashlights hit, there's a mountain lion out here. You saw a mountain lion. Uh-huh. Let's just say we ran, we made lots of noise, and we begged you to come. Oh, boy. At that point, they had been telling us that there probably weren't any mountain lions in our area, but I trust my guys that when they say that there's a mountain lion, and it's right there next to them, I don't know about you, but at night, that would freak me out, too. That was one of those, at that point, once they told me, I was back on to the engineer. They said they saw a mountain lion. Move it! Get me out of here. I don't want to deal with it. That was probably the scariest thing that we had out there. Animals could be hilarious, and then, yes, there were times that they weren't. Have you been at a theme park and had to deal with a wild animal? Or an animal that should have been wild, or maybe wasn't wild? had something kind of unusual, I would love to hear it. Share it in the comments below. While you're commenting, don't forget to hit that like button, give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to share the video too. Thank you so much for checking out the description. There's a ton of info there. If you got a question, check the description. It's probably answered. I also want to give a huge thank you to my YouTube members and my patrons. Their financial support means so much and allows me to do so much. And there's perks that come along with it too. If you want to know more about it, be sure to check the description. Thank you so incredibly much for watching, and God bless. I've had the wonderful privilege of working at 3 different parks. No. Not animal. Not in this case. I'm an animal. Probably the scariest thing, though. The last year I was there, I was on the conductor. No, I was not on the conductor. I was the conductor. Okay, try and get this right. If you'd like to know about my merchandise, contact information, fan pages, and more, be sure to check the description below. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of my videos, hit that button right there to subscribe. And if you want to see another one, well, I've got a great video for you right here. If you'd like to be like these wonderful people here too and support me financially on Patreon or YouTube, well, hit that little button right there. It'll even give you behind the scenes access and more perks. Thank you so incredibly much for watching, and God bless.